and this is Revelation part 16. Determinism in Quran and al-Kitab. In this final section, an important distinction will be made between the two Arabic terms al-qadar and al-qadha. In traditional theology, the two terms were normally regarded as synonyms, both indiscriminately expressing the notion of predestination, which humans have to accept submissively, since God's predestination of all things on earth is unfathomable. We propose to revise the alleged synonymity between the two terms and redefine them as follows. The term that expresses the notion of Allah's predestination is only al-qadar, whereas al-qadha refers to decisions that are taken or determined by human beings. While the former characterizes God's law and the objective reality of the universe, the latter symbolizes the existence of free will in human activities in this world. Al-qadar belongs to al-Quran, whereas al-qadha belongs to al-Kitab. Let us first explore the notion of determinism in the Quran. We established that the Quran contains the objective absolute laws of nature. The cosmos and history explains the manifestation of the natural world and narrates the events of human history as they had occurred in the past. The book defines the Quran as the truth, in the senses that death is true, the sun is true, day and night are true, and so on. These things are objective because neither human knowledge nor human activities can affect or change them. Their course is predestined by the eternal laws of the universe. The same is true for events in history. Once they have happened, they cannot be undone. They are real. They are true, or better, they are determinate. This is the realm of al-qadar. In contradistinction, we define al-Kitab as the part of the book that contains the legal rules of human behavior. In response to these rules, human beings can decide between acceptance and rejection, between submission and rebellion, between approval and disapproval. Allah has granted human beings a choice which they can exercise in fulfilling His demand to do good and avoid evil. We also pointed out that the fulfillment of Allah's rule requires understanding of the rules as an absolute precondition. Rules have to be comprehensible so that both the man on the street and the country's intellectual elite are able to follow them. Rules should not possess ambiguity, tashabuh, but be clear, unambiguous, and precise. Once these rules have been made clear, the people are able to either accept or reject them. Hence, knowledge and acceptance are the prerequisite for following the rules of al-Kitab. In other words, these rules are not unconditioned or objective, but conditioned insofar as they require acceptance in order to be implemented, and subjective because their execution is subject to men's consciousness and decision making. This is the realm of al-qadha. Two verses from Surah An-Nisa illustrate the distinction we have made. Whether you are, death will find you, even if you are in towers built up strong and high. If some good befalls them, they say, this is from Allah. But if evil, they say, this is from you. O Prophet, say, all things are from Allah. But what has come to these people that they fail to understand a single fact? Nisa, verse 78. Whatever good, O man, happens to you is from Allah, but whatever evil happens to you is from yourself. And we have sent you as a messenger to instruct mankind, and enough is Allah for a witness. Nisa, verse 79. The first verse, by stating that whatever wherever you are, death will find you out, makes it clear that truth is absolute and independent from human facts. Be they for it or against it, death will find people out, wherever they are. What has come to these people that they fail to understand a single fact? Hadithan asks the verse. Note the term hadith here, a term that we define as relating to Al-Quran. And indeed, the first verse does not talk about good and evil in human behavior, but about good and evil in objective reality. The existence of life and death, of angels and the devil, which all have their origin in Allah. Say, all things are from Allah. This verse talks about al-qadar. The second verse, however, talks about good and evil in human behavior, whereas in objective reality, angels symbolizing good and the devil, evil, are both essential parts of the truth, and no preference exists for either of the two. Angels are supposed to compete with the devil in what humans do. In saying, whatever good or may happens to you is from Allah, but whatever evil happens to you is from yourself. The verse acknowledges a distinction between what is from Allah and whatever is from human beings, and b, an autonomy in human acts. These acts of human behavior are thought to be regulated by the rules of the al-KITAB that are Muhammad's messengerhood. Muhammad was ordered by God to give people instructions about his rules, and we have sent you as a messenger to instruct humankind. This verse talks about al-qadar, al-qadha. Pardon me. This verse talks about al-qadha. The following verse will give us an indication as to why it is so significant to distinguish between al-qadar and qadha. Thy Lord has decreed qadha, that you worship none but him, and that you be kind to parents, whether one or both of them attain old age in your life. Say not to them a word of contempt, no repel them, but address them in terms of honor. Isra verse 23. This is clearly an instruction that falls into the category of al-KITAB, as people have a choice whether to follow it and treat their parents respectively, or reject it and do the opposite. It is the realm of worship none but him by those who understand, to which the ethical rules, be kind to parents, is attached. It would be a mistake to regard this verse as part of the Quran, because then the ethical demand would turn into an objective fact, whether one subjectively intended to do it or not. To be kind to parents would turn into an objective law of human behavior, which exists absolutely and independently of what human beings actually do. Even if people began to abuse their parents, disobey them, or starve them to death, it would still count as being kind to parents, because objectively people cannot but be kind to parents regardless of their subjective intentions. An analogy, if to worship none but him became objective law, it would not matter whether someone subjectively worship idols, pagan gods, or political despots such as pharaohs, because all of these would count objectively as worship of him. This is the big error that we find in Ibn al-Arabi Fusus al-Hikam, where the author announced a unity of worship, implying that since God had decreed qadha, to worship none but him, humans are predestined to do exactly that, in whatever matter and regardless of their individual's intention. Ibn al-Arabi's notion of the unity of worship, free will to accept or reject the worship of him, does not exist. The rules of Islam became an inescapable fate, heedless of what someone actually intended to believe or practice, a determined destiny that releases people from being responsible and in charge of their religious and ethical deeds. Because of Ibn al-Arabi's huge influence, the verb qadha was seen as synonymous with qadara, and this has had a disastrous effect on the Arab Muslim mind. Finally, let us look again at the verses that we cited at the beginning. That is indeed a Quran most honorable and a book well guarded, which none shall touch but those who are clean. Waqah, verse 77 to 79. These verses have been the subject of another fatal confusion between matters of Al-Quran and the rules of al-Kitab. The verb la yamassuhu was not understood in its indicative form, they do not touch, but rather as an imperative, they shall not touch. What was a descriptive narrative about the angels who did not touch the Quran became a prescriptive rule and a ban for the ritually impure not to touch the book. A statement of the Quran turned into a statement of al-Kitab, and something from the realm of al-qadar was transferred into something of al-qadha. As a consequence, menstruating women in childbirth, and people of impurity are today not allowed to touch a copy of the Quran, only ink on white paper, which is to say, simply outrageous. Revelation is complete. Theory of limits will follow.